This video will be a walkthrough for the Supply from Mills tab of the IRF version 6.0 tool. Before we begin, if you have not yet watched the introductory video to the IRF version 6.0 tool, then you can find this on our website. Please use the Supply from Mills tab if you are sourcing directly from mills. It is here that you will record all the volumes that you sourced in the period you specify, along with the list of mills that you sourced from. Before adding mills into this sheet, there are a few different things that you need to do first. So firstly, you'll need to go to this cell here, period of data reported, and I'm going to select Q1 to Q4. Then you move down to this cell here, total volume sourced in metric tons during the reporting period. And for the purposes of this demonstration, I'm going to put in 10,000 tons. You'll notice straight away that an attention message comes up saying that this value is 10,000 metric tons higher than the volume reported in the table below. This is a handy little calculator that will calculate the difference between the volume that you declare up here and the total volume that you report against all the mills in the table below. It is important that you make sure that these two values balance. When you do so, the message here will be replaced with a message informing you that the two values are balanced. So to add the mills to your list, you need to go and click this button here. When you click this button, a pop-up will appear. And this pop-up is the universal mill list. You're able to scroll through the mills to look for the mills you'd like, as well as using the search boxes up at the top here. If you can't find the mill on the universal mill list, or it's not listed, then you are able to add the mill at the bottom here by entering the details into these boxes and then clicking add. Okay, so for the purpose of this demonstration, I'm just going to take a mixture of mills from different countries and with different certification types. Okay. When I've done that, I click Add Selected Mills, and you'll see in the bottom left-hand corner that this has begun to populate our template. I close this, and I can see that it has successfully populated the rows. If you need to add more mills later, you can just go back to this button, and when you add the mills, they'll be appended onto any that you've added in here already. So the mill information that has been filled in here includes the parent company name, the mill name, UML ID, the latitude, longitude, country, province, and mill certification with respect to the RSPO and MSPO certification. You'll notice that the ISPO and the ISCC certification types are not yet integrated into the universal mill list, so these will need to be entered manually. If you notice that any of the information in the mills that you selected is incorrect and you have evidence to support different mill information, then you're welcome to update the information as needed. Please also contact us to let us know if of these errors and any supporting evidence you have, and we'll be happy to look into it. Okay, so you'll also notice within the mill certification under MSPO and ISPO columns here that some of the cells are blacked out. And the reason this is because these certifications are not relevant to the mill. And in fact, generally when there is a black cell within the IRF tool, it is not required to be filled in. The reason the ISPO column here is not relevant is because the country that this mill is situated in is Malaysia. And the ISPO is an Indonesian certification scheme. Okay, so it's generally a good idea to fill in all the blanks so you can make sure that all the cells are filled in, and then we can move across to the FFB sourcing information section. So in column M here, we have the volume that has been sourced from each mill. Now, if you remember at the very beginning, I mentioned that the total of the volumes here will need to add to the total of the volumes listed at the top here. So for the purposes of this demonstration, I need to enter 2,000 metric tons per mil. Please do just overwrite the formulae here. Okay, when that's done and you're happy that you've got accurate numbers in there for your mils, you can move on to the rest of the section. So columns N to P are representing the different FFB sourcing types: directly managed areas, independent plantations, and independent smallholders. And in these cells, we're looking for the percentage split of the volumes between those different sourcing types. Now, you have to enter this in. So for column N here, I can put in a number. So in this case, let's say it's 88%. When I click enter, the remaining percentage taken away from 100% will be put into column P here. And the reason this is to ensure that these columns always add up to 100%. For the sake of being pedantic, I'm going to put a 0 in here to make sure that the cells are filled in. If I add in any other numbers here, it'll subtract from the residual amount. Okay. When you're happy with that, you can move on to the traceability section of the templates here from columns T to X. So for column T, the volume that's traceable to a mill's directly managed area, you'll notice there's only one type of traceability, which is the full-shaped or grid map / polygon. And it is assumed here that is 100% traceability, but you should update this if you have evidence to the contrary. Then moving across to independent plantations and independent smallholders, you'll see there are two types of traceability, or two levels of traceability for each of them. For independent plantations, you have GPS point and area, as well as full-shaped or grid map / polygon. For independent smallholders, you have 50-kilometer radius from the mill, or traceable to plantation, or traceable to village / jurisdiction, aka TTPA. Now, these two columns for each of the FFB sourcing types cannot add up to more than 100%, obviously. But it's important to note that if you have both types of traceability for a given FFB sourcing type, that you should only write the percentage that is covered by the highest level of granularity for traceability. So for example, here for independent plantations, if you had both GPS point and area, as well as a full-shaped polygon for given volumes, then you should report it only in column V here. Okay, so because we don't have any volumes from independent plantations, I'm going to put some values into columns W and X here. So let's assume we have 25% traceable to plantation and then 75% traceable to a 50-kilometer radius from the mill. Okay, excellent. So moving across, then we have the mill's internal systems and processes. Now, this was part of version 5.8, so I won't linger too long on it, but just to mention that for each question, there is a bit of guidance and instruction in the headers here. You just need to hover over the header for the column, and you'll see a pop-up box with some helpful information for you. You also notice that some of these cells are blacked out. Again, you do not need to fill these in. And the reason they are blacked out for some, but not all here, is because the certification of this mill. Let's go back and look at the certification. So this mill is RSPO mass balance certified, meaning that certain criteria have already been met from the IRF by the certification. And in this case, mass balance covers questions 1 to 7 here, so there's no need to fill them in, it's assumed they're met. In the case of row 3 here, it's actually RSPO IP certified, and it is assumed that all the questions here are actually covered by that certification, so there's no need to fill those in. If they're a blank cell, you should obviously fill this in. Okay, so we're just going to move across, keeping on row 1, to the addressing grievances on deforestation and new expansion on peat section, columns AM to AP. Now, because we aren't sourcing from independent plantations, this cell is blacked out here. There's no need to fill that in. But because we are sourcing from DMAs, I need to enter some answers. So let's say there's no grievances logged for DMAs. but there is one grievance without progress for our independent smallholders. Okay, let's go across then and look at questions 9 all the way through to 17. Now, what you'll notice about these questions, and actually question 8 here, is that the answers are split into the different FFB sourcing types. So you need to give an answer to the question for each FFB sourcing type. So I'm just going to make up some answers here and just say that we have done remote assessments for both of these. For direct remote areas, we have not found any expansion. For ISHs, we have found no expansion. There is some remaining. And then the areas are being monitored in both instances. Fantastic. Now, when we come to question 13 here, this question is actually just for independent smallholders. And this question is asking what percentage of the smallholder volumes are meeting effectively delivering criteria. So volumes covered by a land use change analysis where there's been no deforestation or expansion on peatland, and there is remaining forest or peatland that is being monitored. So in this case, because we have done a land use change analysis and we've met that delivering criteria, we need to enter a percentage. So I'm going to say that we have actually covered 100% of our smallholder volumes in this case. Now you'll notice that this may contradict question 8c here, so you just need to be careful in these instances. And in fact, there may be a reason to put less than 100% here, given there is a grievance. So let's actually say that that's 95%. Okay. Moving across, the field assessment section is similar to the remote assessment section. I'm not going to fill this in, but you would need to fill it in a similar way to the previous section, making sure you answer all the questions carefully. Okay, and then moving on to the minimal smallholder deforestation layer, or MSD. Now, this section and the following section on landscape initiatives and smallholder programs are only relevant to the smallholder supply from the mill. This is new for version 6.0, so this section does require a bit of more information. So for questions 18 and 19 here, you simply need to enter from the drop-down on question 18, and for the response for this would be, let's say that it is a yes, that we have been tracing the volumes back to the MSD, which will be provided as a separate document for you to look through and compare the mills against. And let's say that in this case, we're able to trace areas with minimal risk. Say we could trace 50% to the MSD. Okay, we've come up against a problem. And why is this? Why is it saying that we can't enter 50% in here? It's saying that questions 13, 17, 19, 20, and 23 cannot add up to more than 100% of these ISH volumes. And only to report the distinct non-overlapping ISH volumes covered by the criteria in question. So the reason this is because questions 13, 17, which we covered in the remote assessment and field assessment sections, are asking for the areas of smallholder volumes that would be considered meeting delivering. So each of these questions should represent unique, distinct, non-overlapping areas of volumes. So the sum of all of these columns cannot add up to more than 100%. So if we put 95% in question 13 here, the maximum we can put into the MSD here is 5%, because then that would cover the entire 95 plus 5, 100. It would cover the entire smallholder base. And you've got to make sure that the 5% that's covered by the MSD here does not overlap with your remote assessment areas. If you did have a value that higher than 5%, there would be overlapping areas. That's very important. This means then that for the following questions on the landscape initiatives and smallholder programs, you could only actually put in 0%. So I'm going to change this up a bit so we can just show an example of why there is one exception to this. So question 20 is asking for the percentage of volumes linked to landscape initiatives or smallholder programs. That's fine. And we can enter a percentage here. So I'm going to enter, let's say that 5% that's remaining. And then it's asking for the landscape initiatives that meet all deforestation risk mitigation criteria. So do any of these landscape initiatives or smallholder programs meet all the criteria? And I'm going to say yes, there are some. And question 22 is asking for that percentage. So what percentage meets all the criteria? And I'm going to put in 100%. Now you'll notice that that doesn't bring up an error. Why is that? Because we've got 100% plus 5% plus 95%. That should add up to 200%. Well, the reason is because question 22 is a subset of question 20. It's asking for what percentage of this percentage is meeting the criteria. So it really means 100% of the 5%. So there's no conflict there in terms of percentages. 23, however, does conflict, and it is reporting a separate percentage. So if I were to try and put in any number in here, it will bring up that error. So just bear this in mind. And this question is asking about the volumes that are linked to dealers' programs. Okay, so once you've filled in all these questions, you are at the end. And you can move on to the mill level results at the end here. So from columns CX to CZ, you'll notice that for the first row here, we have the highest NDP allocated category for the FFB proportion from each sourcing type. And for directly managed areas, we have achieved delivering. For independent smallholders, progressing, and independent plantations not sourcing. This is not what all the volumes necessarily achieved. It is what maybe some of the volumes from the mill achieved. It's just to show that some of the volumes potentially are meeting the highest category. So this is a difference from version 5.8, and it's worth noting. However, how do we know how much of the volumes are meeting delivering? Well, we can go to columns DP to DR, which show you the delivering volume from the different FFB supply types. So in the first column here, it's met delivering, and 1,760 tons of the volume of 2,000 is meeting delivering, whereas in the other cases, none is meeting delivering. Okay, so that covers the supply from mills sheet. And in the next video, I'll be looking at next sheets, the supply from refineries and traders. So thank you very much for listening, and I will see you in the next video.